have my Kiara Sky drill. Most of you will not be starting with this drill. This is a more advanced type of drill. So once you get comfortable with the beginner one, you will want to upgrade to this one. I highly recommend it. Literally is the best. It's the only one I've had since I've gotten more comfortable. This is my fine grit sanding band. These are the sanding bands that you want to use on the client's natural nail. The fine ones are the only ones you want to use on the client's natural nail because you want to be careful not to take too much of that first layer off of their natural nail so that you don't burn them. These are the medium grit sanding bands. These are used to remove acrylic, not to be used on the client's natural nail at all. Nail clippers to cut the nail down to the client's desired length. Also want to point out that I have magnets on there so that you can appropriately measure your short, medium, and long lengths. These also help cut the nails down quicker. Here is my 80/80 nail file. This is the best one to use to get a crisp shape, but it's also not super sharp. Be careful with this. You can still cut your client, but it's also not as sharp as a 60/60. This is primer. Primer is used to dehydrate the client's natural nail. This should be applied after removing the shine with your e-file. This has to be applied before the acrylic. This just allows the acrylic to adhere to the nail. This is my Kiara Sky Kolinsky acrylic nail brush. I love this brush. It is one of the best. This brush is a number 8. Typically, a more experienced nail tech will use a number 12, but I feel more comfortable with a number 8. This is the smallest. The biggest is a 16. This is the acrylic powder. This is the not polished acrylic powder. This one, in my opinion, is the most beginner friendly. So if you are a beginner, I recommend getting not polished brand. This purple stuff is the monomer. Monomer is the smell that you smell when you walk into a nail shop. It's very strong. You want to make sure you get the no MMA monomer. The one that has MMA is actually harmful to your health, so you want to make sure that the one that you use is no MMA. This works with the acrylic powder so that you can mold it to the client's nail, almost kind of like a Play-Doh. So without this, you're not able to use the acrylic powder. You'll use this little jar to pour your monomer inside. These are your nail clippers. Once you're done with all of your filing and shaping, you're going to have a lot of dust, so this is your duster. Here is actually your dust collector from all of that dust that you'll be dusting off your client. These are important to catch all of that dust that's flowing in the air. You want to keep all of that out of your lungs and out of your client's lungs. These are cuticle clippers, but I personally do not clip the client's cuticles. They are actually illegal in some states to do that. I live in Florida, and it is illegal in Florida to cut the client's cuticles. So what I actually do is use the drill to just push the cuticles back, and I use this tool to remove gems and nail charms. This block is a 180 grit nail buffer. This is a super important underrated tool that is used after you've applied your acrylic and you've drilled and you've filed and you got the shape, and now you want to smooth the surface. By making the surface of the nail smoother with your 180 grit buffer, you are creating a smoother surface for you to create your designs on top of your nail flawlessly. The gel just glides across the nail very easily. It's much better when you're doing your French tip. It just makes for an overall better canvas to work with when the top of the nail is smooth. This is a UV lamp. If you guys get your nails done, you know that when you stick your hand inside of this after the tech polishes your nails, it helps the polish dry quicker. So this is important. It only takes about 30 seconds to cure gel polish unless it's black. Black takes a little bit longer to cure. To be on the safe side, I usually just cure my client's nails for about 60 seconds. This is barbicide. This is what you're going to use to disinfect your tools. So you want to stick things like your cuticle nippers, your nail clippers, and your drill bits. You want to stick those inside of this liquid. Not the bits, I'm sorry. You want to stick the drill insert inside of this liquid to disinfect it between clients. This is going to help keep your environment clean and professional while you're working with your clients. If you're not using this liquid to clean your tools, you are putting your clients at risk. Always make sure you're wearing a mask. We work with a lot of chemicals and dust, and you don't want that stuff getting inside your lungs. So protect yourself and make sure you're never working without this. And this here is your first client. This is going to be your absolute best friend. This is what you are going to use to help you gain your confidence. You are going to use this to brush up on your skills. You're going to use this to put yourself out there as far as your designs. You are going to use this to practice the most important step of doing nails, which is your application. Your practice hand is going to become your best friend. These are clear, pre-shaped tips. They are clear because you want to be able to encapsulate or add designs inside of the nail if that's what the client wants. They are pre-shaped to eliminate a step. So they have coffin, they have square, and they also have duck nails. So let's start by inserting the nail bed inside of our practice hand. This is the drill insert thingy, and I am putting a fine bit, drill bit, because we are going to remove the shine off of the client's nail, and we do not want to hurt them. So remember, we want to use a fine drill bit whenever removing the shine from off of the client's nails. This step is super important. You want to make sure that the nail is not shiny so that the acrylic can stick to the nail. Acrylic cannot stick to a shiny nail, so you want to make sure it looks rough, just like the nail that is next to it. So as you can see here, I am getting the shine off, being very careful about hitting the cuticle part. The cuticle part is this part here at the top, so you want to be careful not to hit that part. The practice hand gives you a fake cuticle so that you can practice being careful with not hitting that. Here I am holding the KDS nail glue. This is the nail glue that I prefer to stick my nail tips to my client's nail. It seems to work for me. So you just apply a little small amount at the very tip of the client's nail, and then you want to stick your nail tip on. Now, when applying nail tips, you want to try to make sure you apply it as far down on the tip of the client's nail as possible. You don't want your nail tip up high. That could hurt the client if the client happens to bang their nail or it breaks. Now, as you can see here, the tip is actually hanging off on the sides. That's okay because we are going to file that off. So you want to make sure that your nail tip aligns with the client's nail. It should not hang off. A lot of times you'll be able to find a perfect fit. In this case, with the tips that they provide you on your practice hand, I always end up using a number 5 tip, and it's always just a little bit too big. So I just end up filing the sides so that it lines up perfectly with the client's nail. My tip, guys, don't mind my tip. It is a little bit crooked, but you do want to at least make sure your nail is aligned. So that it's not crooked. So I'm going in with my tip cutter. I have the magnets on as a guide. So I have about 4 magnets here. For me, that's about a medium length set. If the client is satisfied, you go ahead and clip it. You'll notice right where the natural nail and where you glued the tip, there's this line that is not aligned with the nail. So where the tip meets the natural nail, you just want to drill that so you could blend it. It needs to be as flush to the nail as possible so that when you lay your acrylic, it lays together perfectly. There are times I have forgotten to do that step. It's not a huge deal, but if you want a flawless application, I would advise that you make that line a little bit more flush to the client's nail. All right. So now I am about to go in with the primer. The primer only needs to go on the client's natural nail. So as you can see on the practice hand, I'm only applying it to the natural nail. You do not need to apply it to the nail tip. This dries out the nail bed so the acrylic can stick. This is my number 8 Kolinsky Kiara Sky acrylic nail brush. Again, I absolutely love number 8. This is my dapping dish that has my monomer inside. And this is the acrylic powder that I'll be using for this demonstration. So here I'm dipping my brush in my monomer to get it moisturized, and I am going to scrape it against the side because I don't want my brush full of that liquid. Putting it inside of my acrylic powder and just pressing it inside until it sticks to my brush. And then you just sit there and you watch it go from crumbly to smooth. If there's too much liquid, you can always dab it on your napkin to dry it out some before you just press it on the top of the nail, okay? So here I'm wetting my brush, wiping it off, and then I am going to use the body of my brush to just pat that acrylic down. So while I'm patting, again, you want to use the body of the brush to pat that acrylic down. You want to keep your sides together, pat the sides in. By patting the sides in, that is going to help you reduce the amount of filing that you're going to have to do. So the acrylic stays the shape of the nail by patting in the sides and then using the body of the brush to bring it down. Now here, I actually let my bead get a little bit too dry. And so now I'm going to go in, I'm swiping my brush, getting that liquid out, dapping it inside of my acrylic, watching it go from crumbly to smooth before I then go ahead and press it on my nail, on my client's nail. All right, so once I press it, I'm going to swipe my brush clean, get it wet again, and then start to work that acrylic downward. All right, so again, using the body of the brush to just pat it. You don't want to stroke it like a nail polish. You want to use the body to pat that acrylic downward. All right, remember, you want to keep swiping in on your sides, and then that leftover acrylic that dangles on the end, you can just take the tip of your brush and get that off. All right, so that you have a crisp shape at the end. Okay, so again, patting in the sides to reduce your filing time. Okay, so you get a side view of that nail to see the thickness. A smooth application is what we want to minimize a lot of filing. So I'm going to show you again. Here I'm going in with my KDS nail glue at the tip of the nail. I've actually already buffed and filed this nail. If you can see, it's already kind of rough looking. So I've already removed the shine. So I'm going in and I'm adding my nail tip at the very tip of the nail. Remember, you do not want to glue this tip too high up on your client's natural nail. If they happen to bang their nail or hit it really hard, it can make them bleed. The nail tips do not break up as easily as the acrylic. So you want to have more acrylic on the client's nail than you do the nail tip. All right, so I like to go in sometimes as well and add some additional glue around the top. You guys may struggle a little bit with gluing these tips to the practice hand, but you just want to make sure that you keep buffing it, and you want to rough out your actual nail tip as well. That'll help make it stick a little bit better if you guys are having trouble with it sticking. While we're waiting for me to do whatever it is that I'm doing here, I would suggest that you create a step-by-step guide that will outline the steps in order of what you need to do first. So here I'm going in with my nail cutter with my magnets, and I'm going to cut it to the client's desired length. And just remember, we have that excess nail that is hanging off on the sides. You want to file that off as closely to the client's actual nail as possible. You don't want that nail hanging off like that. All right. So another thing I want to add to with the filing, you want to make sure that you are protecting your client's skin. We are going to talk a little bit more about filing later on in this video, but be extra careful when filing the client's nails, especially when you're close by their skin. There's a certain way you want to take your finger and protect the client's skin from that nail file, or you will cut them. So creating a simple 1-2 step guide will help you remember the steps in order of which you will have to follow in order to properly apply the acrylic nail. All right, so as you guys can see, I have my primer here that is used to adhere the acrylic to the client's natural nail. We only need to apply that to the natural nail only. Oh, I forgot a step here. I'm going in and I am making sure that nail tip is flush against the client's nail and that you can't really see much of a difference. Okay, so now I'm applying my primer to dehydrate the client's natural nail. And guys, please make sure you remember this step, because without it, it will cause the client's nail to start to lift. So please try not to miss that step again, which is the reason why you should create an easy 1-2 step guide. So I'm dampening my brush. I am pulling it out, releasing some of that liquid halfway out of that brush, and then pressing it inside of my acrylic and watching it go from crumbly to smooth. You see that? All right. And now I'm going to just stick that onto the nail and dry my brush Wet it, dry it, and now I am going to use the body of my brush to move that acrylic down. Again, you do not want to polish this on. You want to move that acrylic down with the body of your brush. Just pat it down, pat your sides in to make sure you're keeping the shape of that nail to prevent excess filing. This will also reduce your application time by making sure your acrylic application is smooth and that it's still keeping the shape of the nail. Okay, so as you can see, I was able to bring that acrylic all the way down to the tip, and now here I am removing the excess. Flawless, smooth application. So guys, again, I cannot stress enough how important it is to make sure you are patting in those sides, guys. You want to keep the shape of the nail. This is going to keep you from having to file so much. And look at that. You see the side view. You see how that application is just so smooth and even all throughout the nail. That is what you want. So always examine your nails from the side and from the tip. When you look at the tip of the nail, it is supposed to be as thin as a credit card. So if it's thicker than that, it's probably too thick, and you just want to make sure you thin it out at the end. So here I am taking my brush and I am wetting it again inside of my monomer. What's important here is making sure that your brush isn't too wet so that when you pick up your acrylic, it's not runny. So that's why you see me here swiping my brush against the side of the glass, and I'm draining that liquid out just about halfway before I move over and go ahead and dip it inside of my acrylic powder. You want to just take it and press it inside. One firm press. Some people like to tap it a couple times. I like to just press it one time firmly so that I can collect as much of that powder on my brush as possible. And again, you want to look at your brush and make sure that powder is going from crumbly to smooth. Here it's crumbly, and you're going to watch it become smoother. Once it's smooth enough, that's when you want to go ahead and apply that acrylic to the nail. That's how you know that your acrylic to monomer ratio is a good one. You don't want it to be runny. You don't want it dripping off of your brush. You want it to be stuck to your brush as demonstrated in this video. When it's firm, it is easier for you to work with the acrylic while it's on the client's nail. If it's runny, you lose control of it. Now, there is a such thing as your acrylic being too dry. You don't want it to be too dry. That way, you're not able to maneuver it much on the client's nail, and it doesn't make for a smooth application. It makes the application very clumpy, and that's not what you want. So you want the right amount of liquid to powder. And again, you achieve that by swiping your brush on the side of that glass, getting half of the liquid out, just draining your brush, and then pressing it firmly inside of the powder. Lift your brush, watch it go from crumbly to smooth. Crumbly to smooth. That's how you know you got the perfect bead. You should not be running off of your brush. Here, I wet my brush. I drained it halfway. I am dipping it in my powder. And you'll see that it went from crumbly to smooth really, really quick, which let me know that I probably have too much liquid in my brush. And so I drained some of it out just by dipping it on my napkin. Then you can go ahead and apply it to the nail. So let's go ahead and prepare another finger. So I'm going to go ahead and put my nail bed on my practice hand. I took my brush out of my monomer because you're never supposed to let your brush just sit inside of the monomer. That's not good for your brush. And so now I'm going to go ahead with my Kiara Sky nail drill. I like to put it on number 3 when I'm working on the client's natural nail. That is the lowest speed that it goes so that it doesn't burn my client. So here I'm taking the drill and I'm just going to remove the shine. You'll see how the nail is going to go from shiny to dull. And this is the best way to make sure your acrylic adheres to the client's nail. This is the best way to prevent lifting. You want to make sure that nail is dry, but you don't want to over buff it and hurt your client. So you just want to do it just enough to get the shine off. Now that we've removed the shine, the next step is to apply the glue at the tip of the nail and go ahead and add your nail tip to the tip of your client's nail. Remember, as far down on the nail as you can go. You do not want this tip high up on the client's nail. If you have trouble with the tip sticking to your practice hand, just try buffing the nail bed again. Try buffing the tip itself. I also like to apply a little bit more glue at the top. I see like a air bubble on the inside, which lets me know that it's probably not going to stick well. So I just take my glue and I put some more at the top so that it can seep in throughout the nail. As a nail tech, something you always want to make sure you do is do a full set on your own hand. It's best for you to know what your touch feels like. That way you know what you're doing that may hurt your client. So always try to do a set on yourself or just at least one nail. So here, the next step is going to use my nail clipper so that I can cut the nail to the desired length that my client prefers. Once I cut the nail to the perfect length, I am going to file the sides. Remember, the sides of the nails are not aligned with the client's natural nail, so you want to make sure it all blends together. Again, the best way to know your own touch is to do your own nails. You'll never know when you're filing what you're doing to hurt your client if you don't try it on yourself. So that way you know what moves not to make so that you're not hurting your client. If you hurt your clients too much, they probably won't come back. So always be careful with filing and protecting your client's skin. So now we have that nail tip on, everything's filed together. We are going to apply the primer to the natural nail only. Remember guys, this only needs to go on the natural nail. Dipping my brush, and I'm going to swipe it against the side and empty out half of that liquid. Press firmly in my acrylic powder. Watch my powder go from crumbly to smooth. And now I'm just going to press it firmly against my client's nail, swipe my brush, clean it, and now I'm going to use the body of it to move that acrylic. Now, you don't want your brush too wet either. You may have to just dry your brush so that it's not too liquidy, but you use your brush, the body of your brush, to bring in the sides and to bring down the acrylic on that nail. Keep your sides together. Guys, remember, as you are patting on top of the nail, remember to pat and swipe your sides so that you're keeping the form, and that is less filing you're going to have to do. That excess acrylic at the tip of the nail, we're going to get that off so that we can keep the shape of that nail. You see that, guys, how I just kind of blended that in, keeping the shape of that nail. I've noticed that when I apply the acrylic on this one, that the tip is a little bit thin. You can kind of see through the tip a little bit. You can always go in with another very small bead of acrylic and apply that just to the tip of the nail and feather it back so that you have a more even acrylic application. But other than that, acrylic application looks smooth. The sides, I've swiped my sides in. I am making sure the tip of that nail doesn't have any excess acrylic hanging on the end. Here I am getting the shine off of the client's natural nail so that I can get that rough surface that we want so that our acrylic could adhere to that nail with no lifting. All right, so the nail prep is a crucial part of the acrylic application. The acrylic application is definitely the most difficult part of doing nails. So make sure you guys are practicing this part over and over and over as many times as you can to make sure you get this part down. Because if you cannot apply acrylic to the nail, then the nails are no good. It doesn't make a difference if you can do all the latest designs or if you have all the latest nail charms, if when you put the nails on your client, they pop off when the client gets home, or they're coming off in a week, or they're lifting within a couple of days. That's no good. So the acrylic application part is the most important part of doing nails. So this is the part that you guys want to make sure you're practicing over and over and over and over again. The design part is the easy part. The acrylic application and nail prep are the most important parts of applying acrylic nails. So here I went ahead and I put my glue on and I glued my tip down to the furthest part at the bottom tip part of the nail. I'm taking my nail cutters and I'm cutting this nail. I think I'm making this one just a tad bit longer than the others. Then I'm going to go in and file the sides of the nail because the nail is too wide for my client's natural nail and we want that nail to blend together. So we're going to file the sides in. And guys, most of the time you won't have to do this step if when you fit the nails to your client, it's a perfect fit. So the different numbers on the nail will tell you if that size is the right size. So the higher the number, the smaller the nail. All right. So a size 0 nail tip is usually your biggest nail. That's the thumbnail. Okay. So the 0 is your thumb, and then a 7, 8, 9, and 10. Sometimes 11, I believe they have, are usually your pinky nails. So remember, the higher the number, the smaller the nail. All right. So I think I use a number 5 size nail on my practice hand. I think that's the one that fits the best. You want to make sure that the nail fits from sidewall to sidewall. And if you have any excess, you can always take it off. But you would rather your nail be too big than to be too small. Okay. So here I'm making sure my nail is flush, making sure that the sides line up with the sides of the client's nail. I'm applying the primer to dry the client's natural nail out so that we can have a firm acrylic application. All right, wetting my brush, and then I'm going to take it against the glass, swipe it halfway, drain that liquid out halfway, pressing in my acrylic powder. Okay, gonna watch this go from crumbly to smooth. Gonna drain it a little bit because I had too much liquid in my brush, and now I'm gonna press it firmly against that nail. Okay, so that one doesn't look too good, but I'm still gonna work with that. All right, so that was a really small bead. That wasn't a good one, but it's okay. We can still work with it. I'm just gonna use the body of my brush to press it down, keeping my sides in. Keeping my sides together, taking the body of the brush, moving that acrylic down to the bottom of that nail. Now I'm going to apply another bead to that nail since that first one was kind of small. So draining my brush halfway, pressing in that acrylic powder. Oops, made a mistake. It's okay. Just going to get that off, and then I'm going to try it again here. All right, so monomer, gonna drain my brush halfway, get some of that liquid out, press it inside of my acrylic powder, wait for it from crumbly to smooth, drain the excess liquid out of that brush and press it firmly against the nail. All right, swipe my brush, clean it out. Make sure my brush is not too wet, and I am now patting it down with the body of my brush. Patting it down, keeping my sides in, patting it down. You do not want to stroke like nail polish. You want to use your brush to guide the acrylic by patting it down. Patting your sides, keep the shape of the nail, swipe it down. Pat it down. Sorry, I didn't mean to say swipe it down. You want to pat it down. Any excess acrylic at the tip of that nail, you want to get that off. I'm just gonna, it started to dry on me as I was working it. So I'm gonna just try to get that piece off. You just take your finger too and just kind of get it off. But I don't know. I'm letting it give me a hard time. There we go. All right, so you can see that this application was good, but it probably wasn't the best, but it's okay because we can always just fix it with our drill. But the point is, look at the side, you see how smooth it is. All right, now the point is to have a smooth acrylic application so you don't have to file as much. Filing will take a lot of time, so you want to reduce that. So now that we're done with the acrylic application, you just want to make sure you're properly storing your brush. So I'm taking my napkin and I'm wiping out the excess liquid, and you could see me taking my fingers and just forming my brush back to how I want to be able to use it when it's time to do my next client. So by flattening my brush, it makes it easier for me to work with. Now that we've applied the acrylic, we're going to move on to filing and shaping. All right, so what you see me doing is taking my nail and pressing that acrylic away from that client's skin so that I can easily file it off. So you don't want to press too hard, it can hurt your client, but you want to separate the client's skin from the acrylic, okay? And you want to take your finger and press it against the client's skin on the side so that you protect it from that nail file. You want to let the force of the file hit your finger and not the client's finger. Okay. So I'm just filing it straight up and down on the sides. And then I'm going to take the other side and protect it with my finger. I'm going to press away that acrylic, separate the acrylic from my client's finger, from my client's skin. And then I'm just going to file it straight up and down. Okay, and this is how I am going to, and sometimes your nail tip will come out, so you want to press on it, hold it, and hold the client's skin at the same time. You want to keep your file straight up and down because however you're holding your file, that's how the shape is going to turn out. So make sure you're holding your file straight. All right, so now what I'm doing is now that I've filed on each side, I'm going to go just underneath the nail. Again, being careful about hitting the client's skin, but you want to go underneath the nail and file underneath so that you're evening it out. So on the side and then underneath. Okay, same thing. We filed the side, so now we're going to go underneath and make it even, and be careful with the client's skin. So you want to use your thumb to protect and just get all of that excess and make sure that acrylic is aligned underneath. Okay, so side to side and then underneath. Okay, so we like to call it like a 3-point filing system. So we do one side, then we do the other side, and now we're going to do the tip. And you want to hold your file like this and file the tips, you guys. You don't want to file your tips from side to side. It just doesn't make for a crisp, even shape. So hold your file this way and file it back and file it in that motion versus from side to side. Okay, so if you can look, you should be able to tell the difference between the nail that I filed versus the one that I did not file. Okay, going back in underneath, getting some of those leftover scraps. Making sure my tips are crisp. Okay. And that is what we call a 3-point file. So left side, left side underneath, right side underneath, and then the tip. So now I'm going to go in with my medium grit sanding band. Remember, the medium grit is the one that you want to use on acrylic nails. You don't want to use on the client's natural nail. So here, using my e-file, I'm going to go ahead and put my medium grit sanding band inside of my e-file. And that little rubber piece, that pink looking rubber piece, just protects all of the dust from getting inside of the machine and messing it up. So I have my medium grit sanding band. And I'm just going to begin to even out the client's nail. So I'm using a side-to-side motion. And you have to make sure you're holding the client's finger properly so that you're not applying pressure and hurting them. So I put my pinky underneath the nail, or my ring finger under the nail, and I use my pinky to rest against the client's finger to help me with controlling my e-file, because the e-file can get out of control. So you always use your pinky and rest it on the client, or rest your pinky on your other finger to keep control of your e-file. So here I'm going around the cuticle area very carefully, and always use a side-to-side motion to even or to level out your acrylic. Okay. When you go down using your e-file, you are removing acrylic. Okay. Side to side is evening out the acrylic. Okay. Downward is removing acrylic, and side to side is leveling the acrylic. So if you have too much acrylic and you want to take some off, you want to use a downward motion, okay? With your e-file, you want to make sure your e-file is always moving. You don't want to ever leave it sitting in one spot. That will burn your client. While you're using your e-file, make sure you lift it off of your client's nail sometimes so that that heat does not start to build up on that nail and burn your client. So already now you should see the difference between the nail that I've used my e-file on and the nail that we filed versus the one that we didn't. And so now we're going to go in and file the other nail. So again, we're going to use our 3-point filing method. One side, next side, underneath, underneath, and then ending with the tip. Okay? Remember, use your finger to protect your client. Keep your file straight up and down so that you get a straight up and down shape. Remember, however you're holding your file, that's the way your nail is going to be shaped. So if you're holding it sideways or crooked, then your nail is going to be crooked. So make sure you're holding it straight up and down and filing in the direction that you want the shape of the nail. I strongly advise that you apply acrylic nails to yourself and file yourself. That way you're able to tell what you're doing to hurt your client. I know I've said it so many times already throughout the video, but that's because it is so important. Make sure, especially when you're doing this part, going underneath the nail, you never know how close you are to that client's skin, and you could hurt them. You can hurt them very badly, very severely. And the only reason why I know is because I've done it on myself. Like, I've hurt myself, but I would rather hurt myself than to hurt my clients. So you have to feel your touch. You have to know what you're doing or what parts of the nail that you're touching that's going to be painful. And the only way to know that is for you to do it on yourself. Now, you may not be able to do both hands or even maybe a full hand, but at least do 1 or 2 fingers and feel your touch. And look at that, you guys. You should be able to tell the difference between the nails that I have buffed and filed and evened out with my e-file versus the ones that I only did the acrylic application on. The 2 fingers in the middle have been buffed and filed, and my pointer and the pinky have not been touched at all. That is just the application only, and even the application still looks really good. So when you get to the point where you can't, well, it's really hard to tell the difference between the ones you filed versus just the application, that's how you know your application has gotten better. So guys, I just want to encourage you to do not give up. Practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect, and that's the only way you're going to get there. Ciao. I hope you enjoyed this video. Click subscribe for more nail tutorials.